It's another Big Fat American exclusive presentation.
From the studios in beautiful Oceanport, New Jersey, welcome to the biggest and greatest podcast ever. I'm your host, Ray K. Hey guys, an exciting show ahead. Don't forget to share and subscribe. We're now partners with the Big Fat American Network on radio.com and iHeartRadio. I have actually, the first book I ever read was written with Thurman Munson. And Munson, as everyone knows, was my idol growing up as a kid. I was born in 1960. And this gentleman coming up is I'm so happy he's on. He wrote 23 books, including that book. Worked for the Yankees for 10 years. Ran public relations under Steinbrenner years, and it's just a pleasure having him on. Without further ado, Marty Appel, welcome to my show.
Thank you. Good to be on with you.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'd like to get into, actually, my birthday is August 9th. I see you're August 7th, so happy belated birthday to you. We're both Leos.
Thank you, and happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I'm 1960, so I just give the year, you know. I let them figure it out.
Baseball people can talk about their age comfortably because it means you're covering a certain period of baseball fandom and you're proud of the big events you've seen in your life.
Well, it's great you said that because, you know, you could figure I was 10 and 70 when Munson came up. I want to talk about him a little bit to start it off. My first game was that doubleheader. I'd like to ask you a thing about it. You probably remember since you were right in the midst of your career with the Yankees, 1970, that June 24th doubleheader with the Indians when Mercer hit the 4 homers.
Yeah, that was a crazy day.
Yeah, that was my first game ever. I was 10 rows up from the third baseline. And
good for you.
You know, you see the highlight when the Folly floaters came, and then Munson caught that one pop-up, you know, from the corner. He was about 20 feet away from me. I couldn't believe Munson was right in front of me. I remember he looked so cool, you know, being a 10-year-old.
I think somebody threw a cherry bomb out of the upper deck that rolled under Ray Fosse behind home plate. And that was a scary moment, too, and I think it was that day.
Oh, okay.
Remember that?
You know what? I remember a lot of things, and I confirmed them. For some reason, I don't remember that one. I should have remembered that. I remember...
You weren't the guy that threw it, right?
No, I wasn't me. I wasn't that kind of guy, but the guy I was with might have, you know? He was a little bit of a wild guy on my Little League team. But I remember Veda Pinson trying to score from second base on a passed ball. Do you remember that?
And there was a fight with Stan Bonson, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I remember that. I remember Blefary hit that home run that was like 10 miles high. Do you remember that to right field?
I don't remember too much about Kurt Blefary. He wasn't one of my favorites.
Now, my question to you, Marty, is in that game, you know, Mercer was the matinee idol. He was just coming out. I like Munson and Mercer, and he hit 3 homers, you know, walked a few times. I think he hit like the 3 in the second game. I left in the 8th inning coming up with Mercer coming up in the 8th because the guys were Mets fans and they wanted to beat the traffic, you know. So, I mean, I knew I was going to miss possibly something. Did that 4th homer hit the foul pole? I remember hearing that on the radio, and I can never confirm if it really did. Do you remember that?
You know, I don't remember. Of course, it wasn't 4 in one game. It was the doubleheader.
Right.
So it wasn't quite history, and I really don't remember a foul pole homer.
Okay.
But my memory could be bad on that.
Maybe I'm off on that. I remember the 5th time up the next night because I was a fanatical fan. He popped up, I remember, and I did confirm, and that really did happen, so I was kind of proud of myself. When you wrote the Munson book, I always wondered about this, Marty, is how does that work? I mean, do they dictate it to you? Because you're writing it with him. I know Thurman probably wasn't a great journalist. I mean, a lot of these guys, there's always someone else writing with them. How does that work? Do they tape record it and then you write it, or just curious the mechanics?
No, I was with him. I interviewed him essentially and turned his responses into prose. He had a home in New Jersey during the baseball season, and we worked there. I can still remember the home, the 2 staircases leading upstairs, the room in which we worked, and we put a tape recorder between us. Diane would occasionally come in and offer us some Coke or some lemonade or something that was nice. Mm-hmm. And I would ask him questions. He would give me responses, and then I would write it, send it to him. This was before Internet. Send it to him. He didn't really comment too much. He kind of liked it. He thought it could use a little more humor than it had. And I'm thinking, well, you're not really like a funny guy.
I don't think I've ever heard him crack
So that's how it came together.
Okay. How long was the whole thing? Was it like 10 hours of recording time? Just curious what the hours
Yeah,
were.
it was even less. he was reluctant to dish too much about what turned out to be a really unhappy childhood. In fact, his wife even asked me, did he talk about his childhood? And he chose not to. And you know what? It was his book. He was entitled to do whatever he wanted. But I knew there was a lot more to the story. But in those days, you did what the player wanted. We got a contract with Coward McCann Gahagan, the publisher, and we delivered them the book. And he had won an MVP award in New York City, so they were very happy to be his publisher. And book came out, wasn't very controversial, didn't get a lot of attention. I knew in my heart there was a lot more to the story. I was regretful that we didn't get to more.
Well, it came out later. We all know, I mean, when I followed Thurman or the Yankees, know his father seemed like a real tough type of guy, you know.
His father was a difficult character. And then in researching the subsequent book 30 years later, turned out that his father's childhood was no Garden of Eden either. It was he had a bad childhood.
Okay, that does make sense. It makes sense. You know, it seems to happen.
Yeah, so Thurman had to break this curse that was going on in the family for at least 2 generations, and that was his motivation to be a good dad, to learn to fly so he could be home more. And that's kind of how the tragedy all came to be.
Right. And there was always I always sensed it when I was a kid. He was my guy. I mean, you know, when Mercer got traded, then he had those 3 monstrous years that really, you know, he was good. And then it seemed like 76, 77, 78. Then it was like he was in the stratosphere. You know, I always thought he was better than Fisk. You know, and
well, he drove in 100 runs and hit 300 each one of those years, and without hitting a lot of home runs. So when you hit under 20 homers and you're still driving in over 100 runs, it means you're getting a lot of big hits during the season. You're not accomplishing that by just hitting the home runs all the time.
Oh, yep. I got that line drive opposite field. You know, he just seemed to always come through. He seemed to me to be a sympathetic figure, which I always picked up even as a kid. I saw him once, you know, waiting as the kids do for them to come out. And he had something, is it me or I couldn't even define what it is. There's some kind of charismatic thing that he had going that no other player had. And it was a sympathy thing. I don't know if that was from his father's the upbringing with the father. Was that in there as you were talking with him and knew him at all?
Honestly, I don't. Okay. No, I don't really relate to that much.
Okay.
He was a cocky sort. His teammates liked him for that.
Okay.
He wasn't a real crowd pleaser with the fans. The fans would get on him sometimes. He would give them a finger in return. But they kind of liked that from him. They liked that attitude that he brought to the diamond.
Did he have that nervous tick? I know he had his little idiosyncrasies with the way he kicked the dirt and he took the helmet off. And he always had that little neck thing. Was that a nervous tick?
Yeah, he sort of wiggled his head, you know, as he was getting set.
Yeah,
we learned these idiosyncrasies as players. I mean, I grew up in the 50s.
Okay.
And I could imitate all those guys on the Yankees of the 50s, their batting stances, their little habits. I remember how Mickey Mantle used to take off his helmet after his at-bat by moving the palm of his hand to the back of the helmet and scooping it off in one gesture. And I thought that was the coolest thing going. And playing Little League, I was doing that too. So I was copying Mick.
Now, if you don't mind to jump around, you know, you joined the Yankees in 7 or 8. I know the story, how you just wrote a letter and you got the job. No one else wrote the letter, and you got in. You know, returning fan mail. That was Mickey's last year, wasn't it? 68 when you started. He was at the end of the career.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I wasn't thinking like, let me do this while Mickey's still playing, because we didn't know it was going to be his last year. He didn't retire until the following spring training.
Okay.
But what a thrill looking back that I got to work with Mickey, that he learned my name, that we formed a little friendship out of it and kept in touch for the rest of his life.
Now, Mickey, you hear stories. I mean, I met him once at Mickey Mantle's. You know, I mean, you know a different Mickey Mantle than a lot of people know. That, you know, he had the drinking problem that everybody knows, and everybody has issues, and including Mickey. I know you have the friendship with him. Can you describe that part of it? I mean, you hear both ends of it. Like, what's your take on the whole Mickey Mantle story? in that way?
Well, the first thing is the phenomena of him playing 18 years without anybody knowing this problem. I mean, nobody knew that he had this issue until Jim Bouton released Ball 4 in 1970.
Okay.
So that was a remarkable thing that, the writers they all knew, and they kind of conspired that they're just not going to write about the players off the field.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's an illness. We didn't recognize that at the time. We recognize that now. And it's an illness brought about in part for baseball players because they're sitting around all day when they're playing more and more night games. And, what are they going to do all day? They watch TV or they sit in the bar with each other before they go to the ballpark. And then they come back from the ballpark and it's, hey, let's have a drink before we go to sleep. And it just became a way of life that nobody thought of as an illness or as a disease.
Ah, okay.
And Mickey was, he could be a little grumpy when he had too much, but it didn't take much to get him intoxicated. And the people at Mickey Mantle's restaurant used to really water down his drinks, but not mix them. They would just add the alcohol at the end so that it just rested on the surface of the drink. And he'd take a sip, and it felt good to him. But they were curtailing his drinking by making most of the rest of it watered down.
When I saw him there, I could tell he seemed a little bit tipsy. I was across the table. I said, Mickey, you're a great announcer, because I really loved his announcing. Whenever he did that once in a while, he had that down-home Southern style. He kind of was a humble guy. He didn't really, the guy next to him was like, yeah, tell him that. I'm like, well, I'm like 25, I'm like, yeah, you're a great announcer. I don't know what else to say. I got his order. He was, signed the autograph to exactly who I said it was, very nice, quiet, but I could tell
he enjoyed being at the restaurant, and he enjoyed fans telling them how much he meant to them, because he never fully grasped that. People would do that at autograph shows also, and he'd sort of look at his manager, Greer, or somebody else, and say, you believe this guy, the way he said he idolized me? And he never really quite believed it.
Okay. He was a humble guy, it seemed.
Very.
For that kind of, 500 homers. Did he really, was he really upset not batting 300 lifetime? I thought I heard or read a quote, 298 he ended it because those last 3 years really brought him down. Did that really bother him?
Yeah, it was really just in that last season in 1968. Bill Kane, our statistician, walked into the main PR office. I was there at the time. Bob Fischel was the PR director. Bill Guilfoyle was his assistant. Ann Milio and Kathy Adams were the secretaries. I remember all this very well. And Bill Kane came out of his office, which had once been Mel Allen's office, and he said, well, if Mick goes 1 for 4 or worse tonight, it's going to take him down to 299.4, and I don't think he's ever going to get back over 300, which he didn't. He wound up at 298. So it was, today they figure all these things out instantaneously. Back then was before there were even calculators, so Bill had to do a lot of work to pinpoint the exact day. Mm-hmm. And it kind of left us in shock that Mickey Mantle is not going to be a 300 lifetime hitter, but that was the case.
I mean, look at his old baseball cards, 65, 64, it's 308, and it goes to 305. It just kind of keeps creeping down. It was like 312 in 1961.
Players weren't that focused on stats back then, but that one hurt him. That one bothered him, especially when he realized he wasn't going to hit 330 in September and bring it back up. Right,
which is a total psychological number, right? Because the difference between 300 and 290 is one hit every 100 at-bats. So it's really the same.
We're baseball people. We know that matters.
Yeah, it's some kind of, it is. Going back, Marty, I know you're a historian. I mean, I'm fascinated by history. Babe Ruth. You hear stories. I have arguments with friends. Can he play today? I say yes, absolutely. Like, what's your take on all that? They didn't play with the black ball players back then. It just looked different back then. They had the gloves. Maybe the batting average were skewed a little higher because, just look at the gloves they had. A lot of balls must have went through that wouldn't get through today. I don't know. What's your take on that?
So are you asking about players in general or Did you mean Babe Ruth?
Well, Babe Ruth, Gary, all the players back then, would they be as great today as then?
It's hard to answer because today it would have been required that they worked out 365 days a year and built up bigger muscles and greater endurance. And back then they didn't pay much attention to that. They didn't work with weights. They didn't have personal trainers. They didn't have massage therapists. And they spent the winter hunting and fishing and goofing off or taking, selling insurance or working in the stock room at a department store. So the athletes you see today are totally different, and they have to keep up that pace to keep their jobs and to compete. So if you're asking even about Mickey Mantle, would he have adjusted to those year-round workouts? I think he would have. Part of it would have been the importance of whatever salary they were making then, because this is what they did. It wasn't like, well, if I wasn't playing baseball, I'd do this or this or this. This was their career. And if they saw their teammates following a rigid regiment of working out, they'd do it too.
Okay. I know it's an unfair question because all those things come into play. I guess it's just like a fun thing, that you kind of argue with your friends, and it's, it's interesting, concept.
I'll tell you, I think Babe Ruth, who did have a trainer, and you've seen newsreels of that, and he did work out, he could have played in any era. Because it's interesting, you think about golf and basketball and football and tennis, and the greatest who ever lived is in our lifetime. We've seen Tiger and we've seen Michael Jordan, and, we've seen Tom Brady and Muhammad Ali. But in baseball, it's still kind of Babe Ruth. We didn't see. We just assume he could have played in any era, and he was so much better than everybody else. Interestingly, in reverse, I watch DJ LeMahieu, and I think of him now as a player who could have played in any era. He just looks old school, and he looks like he could have handled any kind of pitching in any era. And the way he can play all the infield positions is remarkable. Well,
I'm going to get into the current Yankees soon. One thing I always wondered too, Marty, I know there was a steroid era, and I don't know if it's true or not because Lenny Dykstra is Lenny Dykstra, and he was saying everybody did it in the '90s. Everyone on that Phillies team in '93 and the whole thing through. You hear those 4 or 5, McGuire, Bonds, but he says everybody did it, and everybody did something. Did they do amphetamines back in the 20s or 30s? Do you know? The players?
I don't think so.
That was more later on, maybe in the 50s or 60s?
Yeah, I think you'd need to be a historian of pharmaceuticals, but I don't think they came along till the 60s.
Okay. Did they drink or anything? Was there anything like that? Or they just, it was just like, just me like playing Little League. Okay, I have a few hot dogs.
I kind of don't think there was anything enhancing their performance before the 60s.
Okay. And would you put Babe Ruth in the category of Jackie Robinson as one of the most important players in baseball history?
Oh, absolutely. In so many ways, but largely because of when he came along after the scandal of the 1919 World Series fix. He just kind of saved the game. All attention turned to him. He was the most famous person in America, except for the president and Charles Lindbergh and Charlie Chaplin, and turned a lot of people into baseball fans. And I think that contribution alone stands the test of time.
I always thought they should retire 3. I know they retired 42, and I just can't imagine when we were number 3 now.
I don't know about that.
You don't think so? Okay.
They get a little carried away with all the numbers retired, I think. But I will say this. The importance of Ruth to the Yankees remains today because you get all these players today, whether they're from Latin America or Asia or whether they grew up in a household that didn't really study baseball history, somehow they all know they want to wear the same uniform that Babe Ruth wore. that still has meaning today, all these years later. So what a contribution that is to Yankee culture.
Oh, yeah. I know you're a big Lou Gehrig fan. I was reading some of your bio. I know you have, it was 2,000 books, historical books. You don't think of baseball books in 1906, but I'm sure there are like Moby Dick. There must be baseball versions of that. Gehrig doesn't, I know he's number one on first baseman. It's like Gehrig's automatic, on the all-time list. He still doesn't seem to get the due I think he deserves. When you look at his RBI totals, it's like 175, 184, 166, 169. It's almost amazing.
And that's with Ruth hitting home runs ahead of him and nobody on base.
Yeah. I mean, I got him up there right next to Babe as one of the best ever. Is that fair? I mean,
yeah, that's fair. And of course, he never sought the spotlight. He was a humble guy who just went out there and did his job every day. But, how blessed were the Yankees to have those two guys at the same time for so many years? Remarkable.
Yeah. Was he as great as the movie projected him in Pride of the Yankees? Was that good? Was he that good of a guy?
The movie was a little corny. It was, 1941, so things were different then. But he was kind of a corny guy. And I think Gary Cooper played him so well that when we think in our minds of what Lou Gehrig looked like, it often comes up with Gary Cooper's image, doesn't it?
Well, that's exactly what you think, that it's the same, the same deal.
By the way, you mentioned 1906 before, just as a random year.
Yeah.
When I did my Yankee history book, Pinstripe Empire, I think one of the most interesting things I stumbled on in my research was around that time, Teddy Roosevelt was president of the United States, and Clark Griffith, who was the manager of the Highlanders, the earlier name for the Yankees, he took his team to the White House to meet the president of the United States. Mm-hmm. We don't think that happened back then, but it did. And when he was in the White House with his team, Roosevelt said to the team, "Oh, my son Archie is going to be brokenhearted that he missed you. He keeps scrapbooks and statistics of all the games." And I thought, wow, Teddy Roosevelt's son was an early Marty Appel. I mean, that somebody was doing that back in 1906 or whatever it was a remarkable story that I fell upon.
That is remarkable for that year, Yeah. When you were younger, you mentioned baseball cards. Every kid seems to, especially Topps, they just seem to have the great. It was almost like artwork. Did you collect them all the way through up to when you were 15 or 17, or tell me about your baseball card, how important that is. I know you get the stats from them, and there's you collect them.
Yeah, my first year collecting the cards was 1956, which was a beautiful set.
Those were the long ones, right? Those big ones? Was that those big ones?
Yeah, they were horizontal. They had the big headshot and then a little action photo. And, to this day, when a player passes away, it's the image of the card that I have in my head. And I love those cards. I sorted them every which way. I traded some of my Mickey Mantle doubles for guys that I didn't have, which was a dumb thing to do.
Well, I hope it wasn't a 53 one, but you said it was after that, so
yeah, it was starting in 56.
Yeah.
My father was an insurance broker, and one of his clients was a sales representative for Topps. So one day my father brought home a whole box, which was probably 24 packs, and that got me started. And I'm pleased to say I still have those cards.
Wow. Okay. How many do you have? Like 1,000?
Oh, I don't know. But I really collected seriously up until like 62 or 63. And then I left it, and my brother continued to collect cards, and I eventually got his collection. But I have them all, whatever.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That's
whatever
rare.
Years they span.
Yeah, usually kids throw them out when they hit about 21 and get like $300 for them, for college.
Yeah, we didn't do that. My mother didn't throw them out, which is the old expression.
Yeah.
So I haven't looked at them in a long time, but I don't have to. They're all ingrained in my mind. I know what everybody looked like.
All right, so now we're jumping. I want to jump ahead. Now you're promoted. You're running the public relations department of the New York Yankees. Youngest person ever to do in baseball, which is quite a title. title, and I guess it stays forever, you know. What's a typical day like, say, May 25th, night game, 1976? Like, what happens? Marty, you wake up in the morning, like what's a day like doing that?
All right. Well, whether you had a night game the night before or not, you got to be there at like 9 in the morning, 8:45.
Okay.
And in those days, you didn't know what the day would bring, but somehow you knew you'd be on the back page of the Daily News and the New York Post the next morning, because those were the Steinbrenner years when there was always something going on. Reggie criticizing Billy, who criticized Munson and criticized the boss. So you had to stay on your toes.
Was that hyped up, or was that really going on, or did the press kind of just try to make news? Or
that was going on, yeah.
It was, okay.
Especially because the reporters were closer to the players then.
Okay.
They'd go to dinner with them, they'd travel with them, and they were getting, better stories and more stuff. So a player might say something to a reporter, knowing it was going to be in the paper and knowing it would ignite something.
Okay.
But anyway, in the course of the day, I needed to prepare the press notes for that night's game to hand out to the writers. So throughout the day, I'd be updating the press notes. This was before word processing. So it was, correction fluid and whiteout. And I'd talk about the starting pitcher and how he had done against this other team, the opposing team during that season. Milestones, who might have a 10-game hitting streak going, lifetime achievements, somebody's closing in on 1,000 hits. So that would be all part of the press notes. At the same time, I'd be working on the revised edition of the Yankee scorecard, because we updated that every couple of months. Taking phone calls from people saying, hey, I got a bet going here. Can you tell me who the Yankees traded for Red Ruffing? And
so you have bookies calling, or just people betting in Vegas?
No, it was just random people. They'd call the Yankees and they'd say, who can I talk to get an answer to a trivia question?
That's funny.
And believe it or not, they'd forward the question to me.
Uh-huh.
It was faster for me because I knew all the stuff. So I could answer the question and move on. Didn't require a lot of research, and if it did, I wouldn't be able to get to it.
Okay.
So I ran a department. We had a statistician, we had an assistant, we had a secretary. But at the same time, these were sort of the mom-and-pop shop days of baseball. Today, you got over 300 employees at the Yankees. Back then, we had like 40, including the secretaries. Mm-hmm. And I was programming the scoreboard for what the message board would be rotating throughout the evening. I was taking calls from our TV people. I would later have that job as executive producer. But they were asking me about what they might focus on that night, or a sponsor request, if we could somehow show something on the scoreboard, or introduce somebody to a Yankee player before the game. So there were all of these little things going on all day, and for what 60 people probably do today, I was doing it all by myself.
Whoa.
And occasionally we'd have a press conference that I'd have to set up, but in those days there wasn't like this press interview room that you see on post-game shows. The writers were allowed in the clubhouse, and they could just surround a player at his locker and ask him questions, and the same with the manager.
So what happens after the game? Game ends at 10:30. I know they were shorter games back then. Is there a wrap-up at the rest of it, or do you just go home at 10:35, or do you stick around?
No, the press would go to the clubhouse. The clubhouse door was open. The protocol was that they'd go to the manager first, and they'd all get his responses to their questions. Why didn't you intentionally walk that guy? Things that would really make Ralph Houck excited. And then
I'm going to ask you a question about Ralph.
And then they'd go into the clubhouse and they'd have their free-for-all with whatever players they wanted to talk to.
Okay.
So I'd stay till the end of that, get home about midnight or later, and back the next day at 8:45 to do it all over again.
Do it again, okay.
And remember, this was 7 days a week, kind of starting in late February and going on into October.
So it's just grueling
so there were
for
no
you.
Days off.
Right, as a player.
There was no days off, and I traveled with the team, which I loved. But it was consecutive days of work with no break.
Yeah. So you had the same rigors as the players, you know. I mean, it's a heck of a long season, you know.
They had days off occasionally. I didn't.
You did not? Okay. Oh. Ralph Houck, what was he like, Ralph Houck? You don't hear much about Ralph.
Really a beloved guy. We all loved him at the Yankees. I had tears when he announced he was quitting at the end of the 73 season. Mm-hmm. Really, really liked him a lot. And he was a real leader of men. I mean, he, had that experience as a major in World War II, and you sort of gravitated to him. He had lots of success in the early 60s, not much when he came back for his second stint as manager, starting in 66. And the fans finally got impatient and tired of him and held up signs and booed him. And it broke our hearts because he was such a good guy. But he did go on to still manage Detroit and manage Boston and lived himself a good life with a big boat down in Fort Lauderdale called Thanks Yanks. And it was a pleasure to know Ralph Houck.
Well, he seemed to be very well respected, but he wasn't dealt a great hand with that. They call it the Horace Clarke era, which is a rap against Horace, because I thought he was actually pretty good. But I know that
he wasn't all-star material, but he was adequate, and they call it the Horace Clarke era because he spanned all those years. And they didn't get back to the World Series till Willie Randolph came along to replace him, with Sandy Alomar in between briefly. There's just as much the Fritz Peterson years, but Horace got the name.
Was there a difference between the I call it the 23 Stadium and the 76, or did it matter to you? Or, to me that was just such a great stadium. I know those girders were in your way and all that, but just when you come out of that tunnel, and you see that grass, I've been there about 5 times as a kid. I mean, it really was pretty special. Were you upset when they tore that thing down? I
was. Mm-hmm. I loved the old place. It was where I went to my early Yankee games as a kid with my father. It's something I would point out to you today that you might not have thought of. Mm-hmm. In the old days, the grass, especially in the outfield, would get worn out as the season went along. Be a lot of bare patches in there. Mm-hmm. And you don't see that today. And part of that is better turf management. They're a little better at knowing what to do. But the real reason is chewing tobacco. Players don't chew tobacco anymore, don't spit it on the grass, because basically they stay in the same place pretty much the whole game, mm-hmm. and they spit tobacco in that little area. Unfortunately, that bad habit has kind of gone away, and that's one of the reasons the fields look so much better today.
Huh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen anyone hit one out at center field by those monuments or those bleachers by 457? Or I never seen anyone come close all those years I watched as a kid. Nothing ever seemed to go out
over
there.
the monuments?
Yeah. Anyone ever hit a home run out there?
Yeah, Mickey did it in 1964. I watched it on TV. It was August of 64. The backdrop, the black screens were up, and he hit it over them. And the reason I remember it was Mel Stottlemyre's debut, his first game as a Yankee. So it was a very memorable game, and it was a day game in the middle of the summer, which I used to really look forward to because, wow, I get to watch a baseball game this afternoon. How great is this? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I remember that game very well.
And he really did hit that facade and right? That wasn't legend.
Twice.
He hit it twice. Okay.
Yeah.
That's almost mind-boggling when, just seeing how far that thing is.
Well, Mel Allen always used to say nobody's ever hit a fair ball out of Yankee Stadium, which is probably true. And I sat with my son at the last game in 2008. We sat there. And even in the remodeled stadium, nobody had hit one out. And in the ninth inning, I had the presence of mind to say to my son, Well, this is it, kid. This is the last chance for somebody to hit one out of Yankee Stadium.
Now, someone almost did, right? Wasn't it that big power hitter for Texas, that lefty guy? I cannot remember his name, but he hit it. There was one area to right center by the bullpen that if you hit it perfectly, you might be able to slide it through out of the stadium. And do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. Barry Bonds did hit the longest in the modernized stadium, which was in the upper right field stands, pretty far up, but not as high as Mantle's that hit the facade. Legend has it, and it may be true, that Josh Gibson in a Negro League game at Yankee Stadium.
Oh, no, okay. Josh Hamilton, I'm thinking of. Josh Gibson, okay. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, Josh Gibson was the great catcher from the Negro Leagues.
Right.
And a right-hand hitter, and in the Negro Leagues would sometimes play at Yankee Stadium. And he was with the Homestead Grays. And he hit one that supposedly went over the top of the left field roof, but came down at the back of the bullpen in left field.
Whoa.
Which is possible aerodynamically, that it sort of left the park by clearing the roof, but then you follow the arc and it came down in the park.
Okay.
So, I don't know. There's really certainly no photographic proof or film proof, but I kind of like that story.
Yeah. Well, left field seemed to be so much further because right field, I remember with Bron Bloomberg, I mean, they seemed to hit it a lot in the upper deck, but left field, it seemed to never go up there. You know, once in a while, if it did, it was...
Yeah.
I guess
Bloomberg hit some amazing batting practice home runs. He had incredible power if there was a right-hand pitcher throwing fastballs to him.
Oh, yeah. The... Hall of Fame. Let me just jump into this. Well, you know what? Let me get into I'll get into the Hall of Fame. Let me start with the Barry Bonds and these guys. 700 and whatever home runs he has. Do you think I've heard you interviewed before on it, and then it is controversial. Maybe eventually they will get in. What's the argument of not putting them in, really, with those crazy, unbelievable stats?
Because they were too crazy and unbelievable, and they played havoc with the record book. And
okay.
I don't think anybody thinks he played clean. So he's being punished for that, although he never failed a drug test. But I think the evidence was pretty clear that that was not a natural body that he was carrying around.
Now, is it on the science part of it, like this is, I mean, I have fun with my wife talking about this stuff. Like, how can you prove that it was this? Like, how can you not give the guy a benefit of the doubt? Maybe, I mean, does it help you hit the ball, steroids? I know it maybe gives you confidence and makes you stronger, but you still gotta use skills to hit it and all that stuff. Maybe 90% skills.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of players used it and didn't improve.
Right. I know I wouldn't make the league if I was on steroids.
Well, I wouldn't be able to write all my books if they didn't have spell check.
I mean, it's
my own form of cheating.
I mean, it's an interesting kind of argument, I guess. That it's just sort of like gray a little bit, I think. But when you look at the stats, there's those 3 years that they just spike up like crazy. But what about the players that didn't do well on steroids?
Well, I think of Bernie Williams. He's never going in the Hall of Fame, and we assume he played clean and just, he never hit more than 30 home runs in a year, so the voters kind of ignored him because compared to Sosa and Bonds and McGuire and all of them, he paled in comparison. So you get no points for playing clean. And the poor guys in the minor leagues who opted not to use any artificial enhancement, maybe they never made the major leagues because of that, and so we've never heard of them. It was a terrible, terrible time for baseball.
Yep, I agree. I was playing devil's advocate a little bit on that, but you just wish it was clean all the way through. I hear they wiped a lot of it out now. Is that correct? There's no with the testing and so forth. It's basically a clean game right now.
Apparently, but the pharmaceutical people are always trying to stay one step ahead of the game, and there'll always be a core group of players who, if it helps them make millions of dollars, even if they wind up getting suspended for half a year, it's worth it to them financially to exceed at a high level. So it's still lurking out there.
Okay. Pete Rose, I know he was your first client after you left the Yankees. A lot of controversy. I get all the arguments. I have them all the time. It seems like it's I say 60-40 for him against it. It seems like it's almost 50-50. You get those diehard fans that say he should be in because it's the stats. The stats are there. He gambled as a manager, not as a player. What do you think of that whole thing with Pete?
Well, first of all, that's not true. He gambled as a player, too. That's been proven. That's in the Dowd report.
Oh, it is?
The gambling slips are there.
Okay.
It was when he was a player-manager. Remember, he had both roles with the Reds.
Okay. So he did.
And he was betting on his own team while he was a player.
Right.
Well, a lot of people who support his candidacy for the Hall of Fame don't really realize that. They think, as you just said, that it was only as a manager. And you know what? If he had bet on the Reds to win every single day, somehow maybe there's an element of forgiveness there, even though he broke the number one rule.
Right.
But he didn't bet on them every day. There were a lot of days that he just didn't bet on them. And what was that all about? That was, in all likelihood, a message to his bookmaker that I'm giving you a signal here because I'm not betting on the game today.
Right.
Make of it what you wish. And so they had that information that Pete's not betting today.
So that would affect the lines, you would think, somehow. I know every half of run is big.
They did what they wanted with that information and presumably wiped his debts clean in exchange for the information.
Okay.
Did that actually happen? I don't know. Could it have happened? Well, yeah, it certainly could have, and my gosh, what a terrible thing to do to our national pastime to have that element creeping in there.
And how do you know also the games he bet that he didn't just load his lineup up, to win that, and then exhausted for the next night? I mean. Yeah,
exactly. Just the mere suspicion that we can now inject into those games undermines everything that, turned the Black Sox scandal of 1919 around. All of a sudden, here's Pete Rose to bring it back.
And how do you know? I bring this up to my friends that think he should be in. Is how do you know in 1976 he wasn't gambling? I mean, what kind of credibility does he really have? Yeah,
there's no hard evidence for that, but when he was managing the Reds as a player manager,
it's the hard evidence.
There are betting slips that the Dowd report showed.
And Pete was, he didn't admit doing it for a long time until I guess he had to. He kind of said he didn't do it all those years. And there's like an arrogance to Pete. I know you know him differently than from what I see, but he seems, I guess cocky is the word, and, which I get, because that's made him Pete Rose. But do you think that hurt him, just that Pete Rose arrogance that people seem to see him?
Well, sure. I mean, he lied. And then he kept rewriting his autobiography about whether he lied or didn't lie. And people kind of chose to ignore it because he was such a likable ball player and such a winning ball player. And I like the guy personally. I always had a good time in his presence. But, hey, Pete, you can't do this.
Right. Do you think he'll ever get in or no?
I don't think so. I think the steroid guys might, because another generation of sports writer will come along and say, when I grew up, these guys were the best, and the Hall of Fame is incomplete without them. But the gambling issue is a whole different issue.
Right. I guess at these anniversaries of, it was 30 years since he was, banned. And, now we have another anniversary of someone who I think, well, I won't give you my opinion because I like to ask your opinion on Munson in the Hall of Fame. There's a little push now going on out there to get him in on this, veteran committee.
Munson and Gil Hodges, I have the same answer for, which is nothing would make me happier than to see them go in the Hall of Fame. However, I also have a lot of respect for the Hall of Fame process and for the sports writers who vote on these guys, who saw them play their whole careers. Mm-hmm. And both Hodges and Munson had 15 years in which they could have been voted in, and they weren't. So I'm not a big fan of turning around that vote where they failed 15 times and saying, okay, you're in, which we just saw this year with Harold Baines. And look at the backlash that Baines will have to carry the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right. Well, what do you think? Do you think Munson, deserved to be in before?
Well,
just talking.
I would only say I would have voted for him if I was a voter. But I can't speak for the other 400 people who would have had to vote for him, too. I don't know.
Okay.
It's a pretty good system when you get that many people voting. You're really going to separate who should be in and who should not.
What do you think of Mariano being the first unanimous vote getter into the Hall of Fame? It was always one.
It surprised me, but he deserved it because he was the best who ever lived at what he did. Now, what he did, being a one-inning closer, doesn't go back to the beginning of baseball. It only goes back like 25 or 30 years, but he was the best at it, so good for him. I'm glad that 100% barrier has been broken. Will Jeter get in next year? That was your next question. With 100%? And I don't think so, because he wasn't the greatest shortstop that ever lived. I mean, he's obviously a first-ballot Hall of Famer, and boy, was it a joy to watch his career. But he wasn't the greatest shortstop in baseball history, as Mariano was at his position.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This year, I've heard you use the phrase. I've heard it used before. The 2019 Miracle Yankees. What do you think of this year? What's going on with this team? This is amazing. These injuries, and me and my wife just love watching every game. It's fun. What's your take on this?
In the end, they got to win it all to be like historic and memorable. But on a day-to-day basis right now, when we don't have to worry about October, we just have to enjoy each day here. This is as much fun as I've ever had as a baseball fan. Partly because, like the 1998 team, they just seem like they're going to win every day. In 1998, I remember being in my car one day, listening to the broadcast and hearing him say, so at the end of 6 innings, Minnesota 4 and the Yankees 2. And me thinking, this is a victory. They're obviously going to score more than 4 runs. This game is as good as over. And they'd win. And you get the same feeling this year about their ability to just overcome any deficit and win the game. And it's enhanced this year by the fact that it's their Scranton team out there doing it. Those 15 home runs that they hit against the Orioles this week in 3 games, without Stanton and Sanchez, without Aaron Judge hitting a homer, without Voit hitting a homer. This is a remarkable thing to behold. I'm having the most fun I've had in years watching this team.
Now, is Cashman a genius? What do you think of him, Cashman?
Well, if every deal he made was a winner, you'd say, what a genius. They don't all work out. I give you Sonny Gray.
Yeah, but, right. Okay.
But, boy, when he can find Tauchman and Urshela, and last year with Andujar and Torres, I mean, the guy has got a fantastic record at just picking needles out of haystacks that turn out to be great Yankee players.
What do you think of the game?
I'd like to see Clint Frazier get back and still make it. I kind of root for that guy. I like him.
Okay, is he injured now? Frazier,
he's back at Scranton. Fighting his way back to the majors.
Oh, okay. There's just so many great players in there. You're a great player, and you may not even play, in that kind of team.
It's true. I mean, and then you wonder what happens when Hicks comes back, what happens when Stanton comes back, even what happens with Sanchez, because Romine is doing so well, and Sanchez wasn't doing well when he went on the disabled list this time. So it's been an intriguing year, and guys like Andujar and Greg Bird, who were there opening day, forget about it. They're forgotten people now.
Seems like, you get that great chemistry. Then these superstar guys come back, and sometimes that seems to, hurt the team a little bit, like historically, doesn't it? They're back, and now, they lose something from this great momentum of.
Well, there'll be something missing from the general chemistry of what's going on. Largely because part of the miracle is that so little was expected of these AAA ball players.
Okay, right. So maybe the pressure's off or something, because they're having fun. Yeah. I'm going to talk about some rule experiments, Marty. Then I'm going to close it up with, I call it my hit and miss, which is my word association.
Okay.
So I'd like to reveal my guess with that one. What do you think of these new rule experiments?
You want a Yogi Berraism before we get to that?
I like one. Yes.
Yogi was on a TV show, and the interviewer said, "Yogi, I'm going to give you some names. Tell me what comes to your mind."
Okay. Yogi
says, "Okay." And the guy goes, "Mickey Mantle." And Yogi says, "What about him?"
That's what came to his mind.
Yeah, there you go.
Was Yogi the real deal? I mean, he just seems like so beloved, Yeah.
Yeah. Yogi was the real deal. He always felt great in his presence, and he'd usually deliver a yogiism for you. I had one the other day. You started out by saying it was my birthday. I woke up and I picked up my iPhone, and my wife had a birthday card for me, but she actually posted it on her Facebook page. So I saw it laying in bed before I came into the kitchen, and she gives me the card, and I said, "I saw it before I saw it."
That's you got to write that one down. That's a classic thing. Yes. What about these experiments going on in the minor leagues? Do you like some of the things that are happening, and what is happening?
Well,
then we'll do our hit and miss. Then we'll do our road association.
Yeah, I mean, the pace of the game is really slowed down. It's nobody that I know in the game and no fans that I know feel that the game moves along at a good pace right now.
Right.
Some of the experiments they're trying are going to shave 2 or 3 minutes off a game. That's not going to make a difference.
No.
These endless pitching changes are really tiresome, especially when you have a pitching change and you start all over again with the same set of commercials you just watched 30 seconds ago.
Right, yeah.
So I'm definitely all for doing something to tighten up the pitching changes.
Okay.
And I kind of like the rule about you got to face 3 hitters because that opens up more strategy, too.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the manager's got to think, well, I like him. I like the matchup here, but what about 2 hitters down the road? Do I like that matchup or not? So that's more strategy, more thinking.
What do you think of the replay? Do you like the replay or not? It's been out for a while. But
I'm not saying I like it or not, because it does take the managers out of the game more. You don't see Billy Martin or Earl Weaver going out there to argue anymore, and that was kind of colorful.
Right.
What bothers me about the replay is that I think this is the 5th or 6th year of it, and the umpire call is turned around like 48% of the time. That started right in year 1, and it's never changed. So let's say half the time that managers argued, they were right. The call was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that means to me that probably was the case for the whole history of the game. And games and pennant races were probably decided incorrectly if the manager who was arguing was right 50% of the time. So that's a heavy thought if you study baseball history to realize you had the wrong pennant winners.
Yeah,
but I think that's what we got to face.
I remember those in the 70s watching. They used to cheat off that double play. They come off that base, obviously cheating. Like they never be on the base when they catch it, and it was just part of the thing. Okay, they let him cheat.
Yeah,
and,
I don't like where they call a guy out if his hands come off the base for a second.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem like the spirit of the law, but that's part of it all too.
Yeah. All right, hit and miss, word association. I get to reveal my guess with this. You ready for it, Marty? This is the hard part here. First thing that comes to your mind. Favorite color?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What is your favorite color?
My favorite color is red.
Okay. If you were in that foxhole, other than a family member, who would be in the foxhole with you?
Can it be somebody from the past?
Could be anybody.
Thurman Munson.
Really? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I like that. If you were on a deserted island and you could bring 2 musical CDs with you, you're there for 5 years, beautiful weather, 2 music CDs, what would you bring?
I would bring Rubber Soul and Abbey Road.
Oh, were you a Beatle fan?
The biggest.
Okay. Who was your favorite Beatle?
I crossed Abbey Road and got a photo of it in 1972 before anybody knew it was a thing.
So you knew it was back then. That was right after they did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nobody was doing it. Nobody even understood why I was getting my picture taken there. But yeah, I spent an evening with John Lennon in 1972.
If you don't mind giving me a 2-minute thing on that, that's interesting. Tell me about that.
WMCA Radio in New York broadcast our games, and so everybody at the station knew what an enormous fan I was. And this one particular night, John and Yoko were going to be at the station. So my friends at the station said, "Come down." Of course I did. There was only like 5 or 6 of us there for like 3 hours with John and Yoko, mostly with John. Yoko was a guest on the show, and John was outside with us listening in and having conversation with us. Wow. I got a photo of that.
Wow. I would love to see the photo if you could post that somewhere, if you could, find it. But what was anything memorable? What was Lennon like? What did he look like? How big was he? Any interesting things about him?
Well, he looked great. He didn't look, like his hair wasn't overly long, like on the Two Virgins album. He was handsome. And I remember when they were leaving, I said, "Can I take a photo, John?" Not with him, just of him. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Just one snap."
I mean, was he just like you would think he was like?
Yeah, he was funny. At one point, it was a call-in show, and Yoko was taking calls. Oh, I said the most embarrassing thing I'd ever said, but, I'm trying to curry his favor, and I said to him, "John, I want you to know I really like Yoko's new album." Which he immediately knew I was lying.
Because there was no new album.
So I felt stupid for having said that. But then at one point, as I said, she was the guest, and he just got instructions how to dial in as though he was a guest caller. Not a guest caller, just a regular caller. Mm-hmm. So from the outer room there, he calls into the show. Well, of course, they put him in, and he puts on a great New York accent, and he just says, "Hi, it's Tony from Brooklyn. Can you tell me if the Beatles are going to be getting back together?" So that was kind of the spirit of the evening. He was fun.
Yeah. Well, what's your favorite Beatles song?
Oh,
or two. Give me two. Give me two.
Favorite child.
Give me 2 or 3 or 1.
I should have known better. Well, I'll tell you, I love the way they took us into more sophisticated music as they aged. But the last 2 songs I want to hear in my life are going to be "She Loves You" and "I Want to Hold Your Hand." There is such a joy that I associate with listening to those songs when they first came out. So that would be my answer. Okay,
I was going to ask your top 3 rock groups, but you went enough into Lennon, so that's fine.
Let's stick with baseball, though.
Yeah.
Now that you know my Beatle passion.
Thank you. Mays or DiMaggio?
Well, I didn't watch DiMaggio play. Everybody talked about the perfection he brought to the game. And some people have told me over the years he would never, dive for a ball because he didn't want to look bad if he missed it. So that sort of stayed in my mind. Mays would certainly do that. Mays, I did get to watch lots. And, I can't imagine a more exciting baseball player. He was clearly the best baseball player of my lifetime. And even Mickey Mantle said that was true.
Okay. Let me just pop 3 names out to you. Names that maybe people wouldn't think. I'm not going to give Yankees. I'll give 1 Yankee. But Ted Williams. Did you ever meet Ted Williams?
I met Ted Williams. He was John Wayne. I mean, I don't know who
he really was. I've heard people refer to him as that before. So that's true.
Yeah,
he was sort of like that.
It was like being in John Wayne's presence and getting exactly what you would expect from John Wayne. He was larger than life. So he was the manager of the Washington Senators when I was working for the Yankees. So I got to have a couple of conversations with him and everything. But he was kind of scary to be around because he was Ted Williams, pretty powerful guy.
Yeah. Roberto Clemente, you ever meet him?
Never met Roberto Clemente, but my predecessor at the Yankees, Bill Guilfoyle, who I mentioned earlier, he went and became the PR director of the Pirates, which opened the job for me at the Yankees. So Bill got to work with Mickey Mantle and then with Roberto Clemente, which is a pretty good career. And he just adored Roberto Clemente as just such an honorable man that, just like never would do anything wrong. Like we think of Mariano Rivera today, I think.
Mm-hmm, right.
And, just to be in Roberto Clemente's company, you knew you were sort of with a touch of royalty there. And
he died that way too, trying to help people. I heard he should not have been on that plane too. If you read that there was a book on that thing, very tragical. But he did get the 3,000 hits on the button.
Well, Bill Guilfoyle had something to do with it. He had 29.99 with the last game coming up, and he had a conversation with Bill Guilfoyle about. Should I not play and we carry over the anticipation for the whole winter? And Bill said, well, you never know what happens. I think you should play.
Whoa.
What a statement, huh?
Wow.
Yeah.
Last guy, Casey Stengel. I know you have a great book on him. The characters, maybe the biggest character of the game. Did you meet Casey?
Casey was the greatest character that baseball ever had. He was a great character, whether he was managing bad teams or good teams. He was an all-star quality outfielder in his playing days, which nobody living today could remember. But if they had all-star teams back then, he would have been an all-star. And I had some encounters with him because I would be the point person in bringing him back to old-timers days in New York. There was never any human quite like him with his mannerisms and his double talk and his ability to respond to the writers the way he did with such lovable double talk that you never knew exactly what he was saying, but it worked for him. And what he did with the Mets in turning that brand new franchise into such an entertainment enterprise, that was brilliant. If that was his whole career, he'd be in the Hall of Fame. But, of course, 10 pennants and 12 years for the Yankees was awfully good also.
I never thought of it that way. So as bad as the Mets were in 62, it became an entertainment type thing, thanks to Casey.
Oh, for goodness sakes, yeah. And he deflected all the criticism of the team onto himself because he had that self-confidence that his reputation was already made. The Mets got an awful lot right in their first year with a pretty unimaginative team president in George Weiss. But you think about that first year with Casey Stengel, with the 3 broadcasters they hired, with Mr. Met, the mascot, with their theme song, Meet the Mets. Mm-hmm. They just got a lot right immediately.
And they got a heck of a loyal fan base. I mean, the Met fans are really rapid.
Called
they
the
really
New Breed.
love them.
Dick Young gave them their name. They incorporated the Dodgers and the Giants, and they won their fans over to become Met fans. They did so much right in that first year.
Okay, Ocean. What comes to mind when you hear the Ocean?
Ocean?
Yes.
Are you thinking of the musical group, or
whatever first thing that comes to your mind? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that was the first thing that came to my mind. Of course, we were just about Roberto Clemente, so that was another image of the ocean.
Okay. And I got a couple more, but I want to hear, if you don't mind, your all-time post-1970 baseball team.
My pick at each position?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I am.
After 1970?
Yeah, I don't want to go all time because I know the eras are different, so I figure I'd go 1970. I don't want to bog you down with the different era positions, but just I figure let's go 1970.
All right. Well, the catcher, of course, you've got Bench and Munson, but I have a particular fondness for Munson.
I don't think, Marty, you mind if I ask you this? Because I don't think they would do it. My friends, bench is the best. It's automatically bench. And I said, but I know one thing. The Yankees would never trade Munson for bench. Is that true?
That might be true.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Close, man.
Depends on the day that the thing was proposed.
All right. So you're going from Munson.
Bench may have been the best catcher in baseball history, but I'm still going to go with Munson because I'm a loyal guy.
Okay. First base.
First base. You know what? I'm going to screw this up a little bit because it's without pre-thinking it. It's hard for me to. I'm thinking like defensively. The best I ever saw was Vic Power, but he was before 1970.
Okay, right. I got his baseball card in like 1964. So go ahead.
There you go. Mm-hmm. He played until 1970, but that's strictly defensively I'm talking about. Again, it's a Yankee Met thing. It's Keith Hernandez and Don Mattingly. Sorry, I'm going to go with Mattingly.
Okay. All right, go around the horn. Second base.
Can I just do my best Yankees from this era?
Let's do the best Yankees.
Let's incorporate 30 teams.
Let's do the best Yankees. Yes.
All right. So Munson, Mattingly at first. The three other infielders. This is interesting actually because we sort of appreciated it at the time, but to step back and say that when A-Rod was at third and Jeter was at short and Robinson Cano was at second, they could have been the best Yankees at those positions that they ever had, all playing at the same time, which is a remarkable thing considering the history of the Yankees.
Right.
Teixeira was awfully good at first base, but he wasn't Lou Gehrig.
Right.
But Cano, Jeter, and A-Rod at third. It's hard to say who was better in baseball history. I like Willie Randolph personally. We're friends. Greg Nettles still gets a lot of support, but Nettles didn't win 2 MVP awards while he was with the Yankees. So okay. I'm going to go with A-Rod, Jeter, and Cano.
All right. Now how about left, center, and right, and then a righty and a lefty pitcher?
Dave Winfield was one of the great outfielders. One of the great athletes of my life. Mm-hmm. He could play any position. His athleticism was remarkable. I'm going to go with Winfield in left, Bernie Williams in center, and I'm putting Lou Piniella in right just because I like him so much.
Reggie Jackson.
There may have been better right fielders, but we're not going to lose too many games with Piniella out there.
A quick segue with Reggie. You hear different things with Reggie. I hear some negative and a little bit of positive. What's your impression of Reggie?
Reggie was a fine ball player, but I don't like that his number is retired and that he's a Hall of Famer with a Yankee cap. Because he only played 5 years for the Yankees, and one of them was kind of a lost season where he hit under 240, and it was a strike season. So he really only had 4 quality years for the Yankees, and I think the team came to overdo their homage to Reggie Jackson over the years.
Okay.
I would have put an Oakland cap on him if I was designing that Hall of Fame plaque.
And him and Munson got along at the end, right? After their little thing with the store destroys the drink.
Winning saves a lot of problems.
When he hit the 3 homers,
each other, but they got along well. And if you see the film of Reggie's third home run in the '77 World Series in that final game, nobody's got a bigger smile on his face than Thurman Munson.
Yeah. It's like he's glowing, in the thing. Okay. And righty and lefty pitcher.
Ron Guidry is my starting pitcher, and Mariano Rivera, of course, is the reliever.
Okay. What's the best advice you ever received, Marty?
Best advice I ever received is not that dramatic because it really just has to do with honor and telling the truth and even working for some scoundrels that I occasionally did, the truth will set you free. Mm-hmm. And I never made up stories to make something look better than it was.
Because you got to sleep at night, and you got to live with yourself in peace every day. Great advice. Great advice. Other than family, who's the most admired person you ever met?
Other than family?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have an answer for that. It's a fellow named Tom Vallanti, who's 91 and still has his fastball. He was a Yankee bat boy in the 40s.
Okay.
He went on to head the Schaefer beer account for BBD&O advertising, and as such, produced all the Dodger TV and radio games for many years, both in Brooklyn and Los Angeles, just as the representative of their sponsor. And then later on, Schaefer became a Yankee sponsor, and I got to know him really well. And we became very close personal friends, and seldom have I done anything in my adult life of consequence without running it by Tom first for his opinion.
Wow.
He's still a brilliant marketer. I called him up and I said, I need a name for my Yankee history book. And he said, Pinstripe Empire. And
Bingo.
That became the name of the book, and that was like a 15-second conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like that. And major decisions involving family and things like that, I always run it by Tom. It's good for anybody to have somebody with such wisdom in their lives.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, what a gift that is. How was Frank Messer? You don't hear much of Frank. I used to like Frank. He was like the third fiddle in the booth, but he seemed
Never
pretty...
got enough respect for the professionalism that he brought to that booth. Shouldn't have been let go. It was just somebody talking to George Steinbrenner saying, what you need is a more lively voice in the booth. Frank is just too predictable, and well, it wasn't fair to Frank after 18 years. And Bill White and Phil Rizzuto loved the guy, and every time there'd be an opening in the broadcast booth, they'd always ask that Frank be considered. So I liked Frank. In fact, today's Frank Messer would have been Frank Messer's birthday.
Oh, wow. Same as mine. I didn't know that. No wonder I liked him so much. Yeah, I know Bill White let him make the call in the bucket. One of the home runs, didn't there was, or no hitter? I know there was some big thing, and Bill White's, it was his turn to do the inning, and I think he let Messer do it.
That sounds right.
Yeah. It was, the respect was so cool. When I heard that.
Yeah.
If you could, two more, Marty, then we're done. I really appreciate your time. This is great. This is tremendous information. Your historical knowledge is unbelievable. By the way, this is just great.
Thank you.
If you could meet anybody tomorrow, dead or alive, who would you meet?
Babe Ruth.
Okay.
I'd have loved to have been in his company, whether he knew my name or not. Larger than life figure.
And if I was a genie, I'm going to grant you one wish tomorrow. What would your wish be?
Well, it's boring, but it would be for good health and success and happiness for my children and my grandchild, who is just 2.5, and his name is Casey, Marty Appel.
Nice.
He lives in Boston with my son and his wife. So how are we going to make him a Yankee fan is the real question.
Is that the greatest feeling, having a grandson?
It's a wonderful feeling. We'll be up in Boston next week. We go about 7 or 8 times a year, and what a joy it is to watch him grow. Well,
there's Yankee fans in Boston, right? I always hear cheering when the Yankees do well. It's not a lot.
There's so many New York college kids in Boston, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hey,
it is a great baseball town, and as my wife points out, when you watch a game in Fenway, nobody is looking down on their phones. They're all watching the game. Oh,
okay. Because the field is so fantastic, or the game is so fantastic?
They're just good fans. They're really
good fans.
Into the games.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other than Yankee, what's your favorite ballpark? And then we're done, I promise. Other than Yankee Stadium.
Well, Fenway and Wrigley, I'd say equally so. And Dodger Stadium, which is the third oldest in the major leagues now, is such a beautiful ballpark that when I go in there, I'm still amazed that they could have built this park in 1962 before they appreciated all the amenities that today's ballparks have. So
they had all that back then.
They have it all, and they keep putting more money into it and keeping up with the times. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place. Great.
Marty, anything else you'd like to add, or what you're doing now? Anything coming up? I know you have the Pinstripe Empire. You got the Casey Stengel, the Munson books. You got a whole bunch of books. The Pinstripe Empire is one of the historical books to purchase, isn't it? I mean, that's like the book from what I'm gathering.
If you're a Yankee fan that likes history, or even a baseball fan that knows you can't like history without knowing the Yankee story, Pinstripe Empire, I'm most proud of all the books I've done. It covers the Yankees back to their beginning in 1903, and it just, it was an interesting feeling to write it because you knew you held some power over the history of whether you put something in or withheld something. So, like, if I'd finish a section on the mid-50s, and I'd say to myself, well, how could I not have mentioned Bob Grimm, who won a Rookie of the Year award? I got to get Bob Grimm in there. So I was like, the master of deciding who's going to be in the index and who's going to fall short.
So you're like God in a way of the history.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. It's like the Ken Burns of the Yankees, right? It's
a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
And hopefully, that's what's cooking.
Tell me.
Hopefully we get a documentary coming out of that book in one of these upcoming years.
Oh, okay. Could that be within the next 2 to 3 years?
Sometimes these things can take 10 years, but
okay, something might be cooking.
In the process.
Okay, fantastic. We'll look for that. That'll be great. That was Marty Appel. I am Ray K. We'll catch you next time.
Follow BFA on Facebook at Big Fat American. Zach Martin on Twitter at Zach Martin Rocks. And Zach Martin on Instagram. Yeah. Wait, Zach is on Instagram? I can guarantee he has no clue how to use that. See all the interviews and videos at ZachMartinRocks.com.